Welcome to the Moffitt Method Podcast, where longtime strength and conditioning coach Tommy Moffitt explores everything from the art of coaching, improving performance, sports nutrition, and mental training. Now, welcome your host, Coach Tommy Moffitt.
Welcome to the Moffitt Method Podcast, and I'm your host, Tommy Moffitt. If you're listening for the first time, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends. For more information about the Moffitt Method speed, strength, and conditioning programs, please visit our website, themoffittmethod.fit, or email us at info@themoffittmethod.fit. Our incredible guest today is Coach Rich Lansky. Coach Lansky is the strength and conditioning and weightlifting team coach at Manatee High School in Bradenton, Florida. In addition to his work at Bradenton, he also serves as the head coach and director of operations of the Team Florida Gulf Coast Weightlifting Club in Bradenton. Coach Lansky has 35 years of coaching experience at every level in sports. He returns to Manatee High School for a second stint after serving as the strength and conditioning coach and head coach of the boys and girls weightlifting teams at Braden River High School in Bradenton. During his 35-year coaching career, Lansky has worked in the private sector as a personal trainer, a collegiate sports club conditioning coach, a combine preparation specialist, a club coach, and team coach for USA Weightlifting. He has also coached at Lakeland Christian School, Sarasota Booker, and Venice Wrestling. A 1988 graduate of Syracuse University, Coach has helped prepare 5 different USA Weightlifting national champions and served as an official Team USA coach at the Pan American Championships, the Junior World Championships, the University World Cup, and the Mermat Cup. Coach Lansky was the National High School Strength Coaches Association Florida State Director from 2016 to 2022 and is a member of the USA Weightlifting High School Developmental Committee. Coach has won numerous national and regional awards and was recently named the National High School Strength Coaches Association Southeast Regional Strength Coach of the Year Award in 2017. And in this past June, he was inducted into the National High School Strength and Conditioning Coaches Association Hall of Fame, as well as the National Strength Coaches Association High School Strength and Conditioning Coach of the Year Award also. So please welcome our distinguished guest, Coach Rich Lansky. How we doing, Coach?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you for taking the time. I know that it's busy for a high school teacher and coach, so I completely understand, and I appreciate you taking the time to do this. And I think Manatee High is off a fresh win against Palmetto last week, right? Big win?
Yeah, that's our crosstown rivals. So no matter what the records are, it's always a battle, backyard brawl type thing. There was one year, a couple years ago, I think we went down to the last 3 seconds on a field goal, and the score changed 3 times in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, it was cool. I watched it on Huddle. So y'all had to come from behind to win that game. So I thought that was awesome.
Appreciate it.
So let's get started with, the basic questions. And I want to know how you got involved in strength and conditioning.
Well, it started out with a love of just lifting weights when I was about 15 years old, right around that time when that magic puberty starts to hit. Mm-hmm. I realized I wasn't going to be playing in the NBA at 5'5.5". So I realized that my brothers were faster than me, had better agility than I did. I needed kind of an equalizer, and I thought getting stronger might be a good way to go. So I started lifting weights at a local YMCA. Doing everything wrong, of course. Watching the biggest guy in the room and copying them like most of the kids do these days. And then kind of fell in love with lifting weights and saw a big increase in, just the sports I was doing in terms of strength and speed. I was playing club soccer, baseball. I swam. It was kind of funny. I grew up always doing all these sports, and then got asthma when I was about 15 years old. And the doctor looked at me and goes, "How do you like swimming?" And turned me into a swimmer for my asthma. But when I got up to college, I just fell in love with lifting for the sake of lifting and doing kind of getting ready for some competitive powerlifting, things like that. One of my training partners up at Syracuse was a guy named Stephen Corey, who was a GA under Wojcik up at Syracuse at the time. And all of a sudden, my introduction to strength and conditioning had some science behind it instead of, looking at muscle and fitness or muscle and fantasy, as they used to call it, and doing 20 sets of biceps for a workout. And all of a sudden, learning about push-pull and the importance of lower extremity work and those type of things. And from there, I just kind of fell in love with it, started doing a little bit of training, working at a gym my senior year of college, and started training people out of college at New York Health and Racket. And, mostly kind of personal training stuff. And then had a couple of athletes work in, and all of a sudden fell in love with that, got involved with the NSCA and started learning things.
Yeah. So who were some of your early mentors and your biggest influencers?
Probably in the early 90s, I met Vern Gambetta down here in Sarasota. And it was funny because the company I had was coming out of the bodybuilding background was Optimum Physique. And I think Vern's was Optimum Performance Systems. So we'd get each other's mail sometimes. And he was with the White Sox at the time, but just sitting down and talking to him and learning more about periodization and training, because it's one thing to read about it in the NSCA journal. It's another thing to actually sit down and talk to somebody who's actually done it, especially in track and field, as heavy as the importance of training and planning is for track and field and those sports. So that gave me some insight into science behind things. And then when I got involved in weightlifting, of course, I got to meet people like Jerry Palmieri, whose son lifted for our club, and Dragomir Sroslin, our old national coach. Dragomir was a huge influence on me in learning how to lift. And guys like Mike Conroy and Mike Catone out of USA Weightlifting were definitely mentors. And later on, I had the good fortune to connect with Johnny Parker. I kicked myself for not doing it earlier, but JP has been a huge influence and a huge mentor for me the last 10 years or so.
So how did you make the switch from powerlifting and bodybuilding to weightlifting? What caused that shift?
So it was kind of interesting. In the real world, you start out as a weightlifter when you're coordinated, fast, and explosive. And then you get a little slower, but keep that old man strength. You do some powerlifting. And then when the joints stop working, you go into bodybuilding. But because of the fact that I started out at a YMCA in New Jersey, around bodybuilders, I started out with bodybuilding. I did my first 2 bodybuilding meets, I think, right out of college. And then I know, everybody said, you're real strong. You should try some powerlifting. So I got into some powerlifting, and I was at nationals one year, and there was a guy warming up next to me doing power cleans for his deadlift, which was kind of like, wow, what's this? And I started looking at some of that, and I got involved in using the weightlifting movements just to try and increase some explosiveness for myself. But then I had some high school athletes that all of a sudden got college scholarships and, started getting their summer programs, and, it's plyometrics and cleans and stuff. And I said, I got to learn more about this stuff. And I was fortunate enough to train with a guy named Preston Huberger, who was a junior national level lifter down here in Florida. And I remember watching this guy. We were at this gym, and he's in a singlet with this long hair doing front squats for 405 for reps, going, there's something there, and Preston kind of taught me a little bit about lifting. And I was fortunate enough in 1996 to go up and get my club coach certification. And if you want to talk about having the Kool-Aid handed to you, I had Mike Catone, Lynn Jones, and Mike Conroy teach my class. And Lynn's another mentor of mine in the beginning too. So I came back from Atlanta, and I was sold. This was the way to go.
All right. So with all of those different influences, okay, what would you say is your coaching philosophy today?
Well, on one hand, I look at 2 things. One of our coaches here, Coach Joe Canan, was a Hall of Fame high school coach who brought me in here in Manatee. When I first interviewed with him, he said to me, you have your coaching philosophy and you have your training philosophy. And your training philosophy, for him, was X's and O's. For me, it might be sets, reps, percentages, set up. But my coaching philosophy is a lot like my teaching philosophy. One thing I learned from Vern is teaching is coaching and coaching is teaching. And you can't be a good coach unless you're a good teacher, and you can't be a good teacher unless you're a good coach. I firmly believe that. It's probably one of the reasons I enjoy teaching like the level 1, level 2 coaching courses for USA over the last 20 years. I love being able to communicate that. So that's one thing. Second thing is it's about relationships, no matter what level you're at. I found that when I was doing NFL combine stuff, when I'm doing high school stuff, when I'm doing private training, especially at the high school level, though, it's about building relationships. Once you get somebody to trust you and they know that you have their back and you're not going to run away at first time they do something wrong, you're going to give them a second chance, they'll trust you. And then if they trust you, they'll work for you. If they work for you and you have put your time into designing a good program and you make the adjustments on the, what you're seeing, what we call those acute versus chronic adaptations, you're going to have some success. I've always said, and this may sound counterintuitive, you can take two programs. You can take a crappy program that's just basic, like bench, curls, leg extensions. But if you get 10 guys doing that program consistently every other day and working intently versus the best program in the world of periodization, they only do it once a week and they go at it with 50% intensity. The other squad, that first squad, is actually going to make better gains. Mm-hmm. So my philosophy is definitely building relationships. And from the relationships, that's my foundation. And then after that, chasing, coaching kids and not coaching the numbers, not coaching the weights. Counterintuitive to being a weightlifting coach, of course, when I'm making calls at a meet. But the base, the foundation, the building up, getting ready, the preparation for the meet, the training. Now that's going to be about not chasing numbers all the time, but technique. And if technique goes, kids are going to get strong with a basic periodized program, especially at the high school level when they have that wonderful thing called puberty. So that would be my coaching philosophy. My training philosophy, I'm a ground-based, platform-based, explosive movement type guy. We're gonna clean, we're gonna snatch, we're gonna do the derivatives, we're gonna squat, we're gonna press, we're gonna pull, and then a lot of my movement stuff happens on the field. I'm fortunate enough now that we just got new turf here at Manatee, and it's beautiful. And I get the guys out twice a week in the mornings to start us off, and we do a change of direction one day and linear speed the other, and we do a lot of that stuff. So in the weight room, I'm really concentrating on impulse, rate of force development, and then our sets, reps, and percentages kind of mimic whatever the character is of that session that we're trying to apply.
Yeah. So what brought you back to Manatee this second time? And have things changed since you were last there?
Well, I was gone for 4 years, and I want to say that the 4 years away, they weren't bad 4 years. They were different, and the kids I had at the other school were great kids too. They're going to be kids that you can pour into no matter where you're at. I found that out. But I really missed the history of Manatee. I missed the level of intensity. I missed the demographic mix, a little different. We've got a little different mix. We've got African-American, Hispanic, Caucasian. We've got a whole different mix here at Manatee. It's a little different than out east where I was before. And I'll be honest, I had some really great administrators too at Braden River that actually came over to Manatee. So it was a win-win. So when I got back to Manatee, it was like I never left. It really was. It's been great, and the kids have been great, and the teachers and the coaches. I'm fortunate enough that on the coaching staff with the football, I've got 2 guys that I coached with before, and I've got 3 I coached with before. I've got 2 that I actually coached that played for me here.
That's awesome.
So that's awesome. It's awesome. I love it back here. It's other than a little bit more of a commute, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. All right, let's get into some X's and O's here, nuts and bolts. So what's a normal day look like for the kids that come into the gym there? And let's say it's an off-season program, just a basic off-season week of training.
Right, so it's a little different. I'm really kind of gifted this year because this year I've got two of my first class periods are football. Are all our football athletes, and the third one is actually my girls' weightlifting team, all girls one.
Oh, wow.
And then I get a little break, planning period, and then I'm actually in the classroom this year because, like I said, teaching is coaching, coaching teaching. Yeah. So I teach Introduction to Athletic Training, which comes into the a personal training certification next year as the second level of that. But when they walk in the morning, first and second period of football, they're ready to go. We got 5 minutes to change out, and then we go through a 5 to 7 minute dynamic warm-up, and then Mondays in season, we hit squats. I mean, I'm a firm believer, even though in a perfect world, I would do my fast, explosive stuff earlier in the week because of the just the level of play that we have and the hanging and banging that goes on the field. I like to get my heavy squats done on Monday so that their legs are fresh on Friday. Yes. So Monday's going to be our squats and presses. And then Tuesday, we're on the field first. Then we come in, we'll do power snatches and snatch pulls and maybe some jump stuff. Wednesday, we'll do a lighter single leg exercise. I say lighter, but I mean, our step ups, we push our step ups up to 315, 400 pounds sometimes with our big guys. So we'll do that. We'll do our straight leg or stiff leg variations with RDLs with dumbbells on Wednesdays. We're on Mondays, we'll do fat barbell RDL combo row. So it's, it kind of tapers down a little as the week goes on. We want to be a little faster, more explosive as we come, but I really don't back off. And then we'll do a dominator bar, like a Swiss bar type, some people call it, bench press on Wednesdays. Thursdays, we're back on the field doing change of direction or band resisted stuff. And then we come in and we clean and jerk. We just clean and jerk the rest of the period. We just go. And as we get closer into the postseason, rest periods drop, the percentages drop a little bit. And we're looking at more on work capacity because a lot of teams are going to be placing our no huddle teams and want our guys ready metabolically. And then game day, people think I'm crazy. Game day, we actually go heavy on cleans. We get the central nervous excited. My philosophy has always been for the last 15 years that if we practice every day and we lift every day and we practice every day, and in practice, you're going to get a lot more reps than you get in a game normally, and you'll be out there longer. Why change anything? If a guy's dinged up, that's one thing. We'll make adjustments. Of course, that's the individual idea. That's the art of coaching. But we get after it. We'll go up to sometimes 75 to 90% for a single on game day. And I tell you what, it gets the guys going. They're ready to go.
Yeah. No, so and it's not funny. It's intriguing. While you talk, I hear many quotes from Coach Parker. All right. And then there's also a great deal of I can see some of his influences in what you do. So it's really neat seeing that. But I think a lot of high schools, well, let me go back. So Coach Parker used to always talk to me about having heavy clean days either the day before. Now, he would have liked to have done them on game day, but he couldn't always do that because he was coaching in the NFL. But he would always talk about heavy cleans as close to the game as possible because of its post-activation potentiation. Plus, it does something to the mindset as well. And I'm a firm believer in that. And I like the fact that you train every day throughout the week. There's a lot of variety. But one thing that Coach used to always tell me was that volume is what fatigues you, not intensity. And that as long as you keep the volume of the work that you're doing in check and you're hitting those numbers well, then that you're going to be fine because the body adapts to that, and it's very similar to football. That's why we train that way. So that's I like hearing you say that. I
definitely agree with that. In fact, back in 2000. It was interesting. My first international trip as a personal coach for USA Weightlifting was at Junior Worlds in Sofia, Bulgaria. So I got an education down in the, the bar of the hotel, talking to some coaches from other countries.
Yeah.
And I came to a conclusion, looking at a lot of research. In fact, I think I did a presentation back in 2000 from the NSCA, which is probably outdated now, but it was at the national conference. But it was called "Adapting the European Training Method to the Realities of American Life." And basically, my conclusion was, and there are much smarter guys. You talk about influences, on the other side, on the Brainiac side, Meg and Mike Stone are huge influences of what they've done. Bill Sands up there, Kyle Pierce. The stuff that they've done and what they've done. Yeah. They're all, I consider them all friends as well. But one of the things I really came to the conclusion was we can handle the intensity or we can handle the volume, but not both, especially for a drug-free athlete or an athlete that works a job or goes to school and those type of things. So what I looked at is the intensity was the key. So my volume, people they ask about, you see these Twitter posts and things like that would say, well, how many exercises do you do in a session? And they look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like 3.
Yeah.
We got 55 minutes, including change out time and time to get a peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and chocolate milk in them after, So we do 3 exercises, 3 core, and we get after it though. And even during the summer session, when I got the guys, for 2 hours, we might do 5 exercises. I'm a big believer in pick something, become really good and efficient at it, work at it. And when it stops working, then I'll go into my toolbox to look for something else or put a little tweak to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've always really liked all of the training hall videos that Randall Strawson did through Ironmind. And you would look, and those guys, they're preparing for European, Asian, World Championships. And they're in their training at maximal intensity, but they're only doing 1 or 2 reps. They'll do 2 reps in their warm-up sets, and then, they're doing all singles and everything that they do. But the intensity is so great And those guys are preparing for some of the big, except for the Olympics, the biggest meets of their career, and they're in there banging weights. And I always that right there in itself always influenced me to think about training a little differently. Now, and in football, the sport that I train primarily, it's a little different than weightlifting. There's not nearly as much running around in weightlifting, but the central nervous system, adapts, and the neuromuscular system, it all adapts to whatever stimulus you impose on it. And so if you want dynamic, explosive, strong, resilient athletes, then you got to train them that way. Because you're not going to get that sitting on a machine doing leg extensions and leg curls. It just doesn't happen.
No. So I'll tell you how many machines I have in my weight room here at Manatee.
0.
Unless you call a glute ham developer a machine, that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got platforms, we've got racks, we've got some benches, we've got dumbbells, we've got barbells, and some different stuff like that. It's interesting you talked about CNS, because I always felt that the track and field coaches had the best understanding of how to prepare for strength and power sports.
Yeah.
Especially with the tapering and things like that. When you look at football too, because then they got the volume as well. When you look at you look at books that might have influenced you. Zatsiorsky's book, Science and Practice of Strength Training, when he broke down the average number of reps done by the USSR team or the Romanian team or the Bulgarian team, at certain percentage, you're looking at 1 to 3 reps per set. And I think Rob Panarello, who's also a great influence. Rob, when he went to the Soviet Union, he came back, he talked about the zones of intensity. And there's a lot to be said to that. Once you figure out how you're going to monitor volume and intensity, whether you're counting all your reps at 90% or all your reps between 70%, just be consistent and, use your eyes too. Figure out what you're watching and, is there snap to the bar? Is the bar moving fast? I know when we had you on during the COVID talks, I remember you talked about using the Tendo units and the different units. Perfect. And, at the high school level, I really don't have that at my eyes, but it really goes back to, is the bar slowing down?
Right.
When do you back off? Those type of things.
Exactly. All right. Do you coach women any different than you coach the men?
So my younger women, like my 9th and 10th graders, do more hypertrophy work, especially around the elbows and stuff like that. Just a lot of them have some hypermobility, or they just haven't done the upper body stuff. And because in Florida, we have a hybrid of weightlifting. It's Olympic and traditional. Yeah. So Olympic is snatch and clean and jerk, but traditional is bench press and clean and jerk. With the bench press, you're going to have a little bit more hypertrophy training and stuff like that. So and then with football, my younger guys, my 9th graders definitely spend more time in a hypertrophy phase just because we got to put some more size on them. So, as much as they hate it, they're going to be spend times in those 6, 8s, and 10s on the squat rack, as Randy Strazen used to say, looking for the white buffalo in the sky.
Yeah. All right. So how do you train for the different sports? Is there anything that you don't do for all of them?
The only change I might make is for some of my, like in baseball, a lot of times we'll do more snatch pulls than full snatches, or we'll do some dumbbell snatches. My quarterbacks in season we don't snatch past 60% of max. We switch them over to pulls once we get past 60, just because there's a lot going on. I don't want to risk anything like that. But
well, that's a volume thing. So
because they're throwing, and if the wrist gets jacked up and wrong, as you well know, more of the injuries are going to happen on the field, just impact type stuff, getting stepped on, whatever it might be. But I don't want, as a strength and conditioning coach, we always talk about we want to improve performance, we want to improve acceleration, speed, dynamic stabilization, change of direction, ability, reaction. But when you really think about it, and this is a Coach Parker line, he said that Parcells used to always tell him about the most important ability was availability.
Yeah.
Keep them injury free, that type of thing. And that's true because, if you're not on the field, you can't help the team.
Yeah.
So,
all right. So
volume wise, I will back off on that, but really everybody's got a base, and it goes back to what Dragomir and Lynn Jones taught me way back when. We start out with a warm up, an explosive lift. Then we'll do a lower body strengthening lift, an overhead lift, some kind of a single leg, and some kind of a, rowing or stabilization stuff, and we'll hit the posterior chain. It's going to be pretty basic. If I can hit those twice a week throughout the week, I'm in good shape.
Yeah, solid program. Yeah. And that's the thing. There's nothing fancy about it. It's just solid work.
And interesting enough, my girls' weightlifting team, I got 65 girls on the team this year, which is 55 this area. 65. 65. So I'm running I'm around a lot of beginners because, and you know how I had my tryouts? They did a vertical jump, a long jump, and I put a bar in their hand, wanted to see if they were coachable, if they could follow directions. And that's how you made the team. It had nothing to do with how much you could lift.
Right.
And that goes back to a study I think Kyle Pierce did way back in Shreveport. He went out to like some local boys club and had everybody long jump and pick kids out and taught them how to lift.
Yeah. He was famous for doing that too.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I really looked
ones.
at with the girls is we've got our JV program's a little different, more some base. They do a lot more technique and stuff like that. My varsity program is a little more advanced if they've been with the team for a while. But really, everybody is going to train on some variation of that same program, unless somebody's injured or something like that. And then you have single leg stuff that you can do or single arm stuff.
Yeah.
So
So I know that you probably have a lot of two-sport athletes, as every high school does. In this case, I know it's hard to get a good off season. How do you manage this population of players? And do you do anything differently with those men and women?
So basically, we stay in the same program. The beauty of it is most of my boy weightlifters are also my football players and also or wrestlers, and also they also do track. My lighter guys run and my heavier guys throw. So I sit down with the track coaches, and one of the track coaches is one of my former athletes here, and the other track coach is a guy I've coached with here since the very first time. And I work with the track team too. So basically we arrange our schedule so that we alternate important meets. And it's really more of a weekly type thing, but we don't back off. I mean, I'll do a basic 4-week microcycle or mesocycle where we'll do a base week, a load week, back off week, and then a reach week or a kind of test week. And that test week, we finish off with a meet, unless it's like states or regionals or something like that, in which case we'll flip the third and fourth week and we'll taper down a little bit. And our heaviest stuff, we might clean up to 90% on Monday instead of going up on a Friday, and let everybody kind of rest down. Because who was it? Bowerman used to say, the hay's in the barn,
Yeah.
Now it's just a matter of making sure that the horse is ready to run on the right day.
Yeah, that's right.
So I really don't change that much. Everybody learned, like even when I have my general population weightlifting classes here, everybody snatches and clean and jerks. Everybody learns. That's part of their curriculum.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we're going to take a short break right here from the conversation for about a minute and talk about our friends at Connexon. Data analytics has transferred how coaches visualize performance trends to complement years of coaching experience. Whether you are a performance coach assessing a player's load or a basketball coach tracking shot statistics, Connexon delivers cutting-edge, objective data solutions to support your coaching staff to help athletes reach their peak performance levels on game day. Learn more about data analytics solutions, improving athletic performance at Connexon.com. Again, that is Connexon.com. Okay, now back to the conversation. All right. So
it was interesting, Coach, real quick, that you talked about the assessment. People ask about, because, after 35 years, I don't want to say I'm stuck in my ways, but my assessment for, how they look during the warm up, of course, and that goes back to like Dan Paff and some of the stuff he wrote about dynamic warm up and looking at stuff like that. But also, I just use a jump mat. If it looks like I'll have the guys jump in and they'll do a jump mat, and if they're within 2 inches of the best, then we're going. If consistently they're all 5 inches, 6 inches, then I might adjust things and switch a speed day to a strength day or something like that. But I keep it pretty simple.
Yeah, and those jump mats are I call them a poor man's force plate. Because I had one in 1988. I guess it's probably still at the school, but I had one when I coached at John Curtis in 1988. I would do two things. I would do this on every Monday. We had the old original version of the Polar heart rate monitors, and the heart rate monitors had a recovery index on it. So I would set up. And I was fresh out of college, so I would set up a metronome, and I would have my best players, and this only took a minute. They would do the Harvard step test on a box. They'd come in before school. Well, first they would jump on the jump mat, okay? They would all line up and they'd all jump on the jump mat. And then I'd turn on a metronome and I had the boxes laid out. And then they would start and they would do the Harvard step test. As soon as the Harvard step test was complete, they would sit down and they would mark their watch with a little red button on it. And then when I would give them the time up, I think we would rest for 2 minutes. And then they would hit the stop on the stopwatch or the polar watch. And then I would download that data. So from the time they ended the step test until they ended that during their rest period, I would mark that and I would hit the recovery index that Polar had built in. It was an algorithm. They don't have it anymore, but I used it a lot. So I could tell based on their heart rate on Mondays and by the jump test, 2 very elementary tests, I could tell if our team was fatigued. It was just simple. And I would go to the coach and say, hey, coach, we're ready to roll, man. Let's get it. And then if I saw 10% reduction in those 2 tests, I'd say, coach, we're a little fatigued. Let's see how practice goes today, and we'll adjust down the road if needed. And that's all you have to do. And those things still stand the test of time. I mean, the analytics have gotten more technical. There's more brands and there's more tools out there to do it. But it really boils down to basic fundamentals, jumping and heart rate. And not a lot of these analytical tools that are available today use heart rate because it adds a little extra pain in the butt for the coaches because you have to wear chest straps. And a lot of collegiate athletes, they whine and cry about they can't breathe and all this stuff on it. But we made our players wear them at LSU, and it helps. No. It really does.
No, I agree. And if you have the budget time, I think so I'm working on it's funny, in my 50s, I'm working on a master's right now in applied sports psychology through CTANTA. Got kind of a partial fellowship, and I was always interested. But one of the last things we had to look at was some different tools. And I was looking at the galvanic skin response stuff. Mm-hmm. And some of that stuff would be awesome for me to use, especially if I was back, just doing weightlifting and training like Rob Murphy or Pat Judge for the world or something like that. Some of my higher level athletes when I could do more one-on-one. But I needed something at Manatee at the high school level, especially just me when I'm by myself. I really needed something that I could do quickly that didn't take away from my 55 minutes. So for me, a lot of it was combine the eye test and the vertical jump. But I have back in the day, I think at Booker High School in the early 90s, I did play around with the Polar with the old chest strap. Had to tell the kids to stop licking it to make it wet, the old chest straps. Imagine that during today's world.
Yeah. But, I had some window lickers when I coached in high school.
There's some great stuff out there. There really is. I was teaching one of the USAW courses at IMG like 2-3 years ago, and I was looking at their platforms and all the free form or elite form or whatever they have there. Yeah, it's beautiful stuff, but can I use it and can I apply it in my situation? So, but I do look at all the analytics and they're great. But in the end, I really look at another Coach Parker saying they call it old school because it stood the test of time.
Yeah. He spoke at the University of Tennessee, and it was a great day because we had him, we had Louis Simmons, Johnny Parker. I can't even think of his name right now. Not Lauren Seagraves, Steve Sylvie from Blinn Junior College. And then we had one other coach. I'll think of him in a second. But so we had those guys all in the same room at the same time. And Coach Parker was talking. His talk was the things that have stood the test of time. And and then he said old school. And he goes, these are the things that have stood the test of time. So I actually still have his notes. He left his notes for the talk laying on the podium. And so I kind of, because I was in charge of the clinic that day. And so I just kind of kept those notes. He'll probably call me and want those back.
I've been really blessed because I've got some really good information that I have to pass on at some point as I get older. But, there have been guys that I've met and from different countries too when I traveled, that just like the amount of materials that I was able to get. And then Vern used to let me go through his library, and there's just some great information. And
great mentors.
Take as much, be a lifelong learner. Talk about a coaching philosophy. I'm 57 years old, going to be 58, and I'm back in doing schoolwork, doing projects and stuff like that for myself. But I do believe that the more tools I have as a coach and teacher, the more I can pour into my athletes and make a difference in their lives.
Yeah. I wish we had more time, because I would want to talk about that galvanic skin response, because I was hunting last night and I shot a deer, and I climbed out of the deer stand. And as I got closer to that deer, and I don't know how many deer I've shot, 40, 50, I don't know, between deer and pigs, close to 75, 80 animals. The closer I got to that animal, I started shaking, and it was cold. It was about 35 degrees last night. But the nervous response that I got from shooting an animal and walking up on it, the level of excitement was overwhelming. And I broke out in a sweat, and then I got really cold. So I could go on for days and days and days about that. But that's the class bell just rang. So
yeah, I'm good. I'm still
okay,
good.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. All right. So let's talk some more weightlifting. And I want to talk because you were talking about your beginners and everything. Well, let me say this. You don't often get someone like you on here. I haven't gotten somebody on here like you that can talk weightlifting, because, wrestling and weightlifting are my two favorite sports. I just played football, but wrestling and weightlifting have always, if I'm watching a sport on television, I'm watching it because there's no wrestling or weightlifting. So it's great to have you on here. So can you talk about how you introduced the snatch and the clean and jerk to beginners? And I know you could talk for 24 hours about this, but if you could just talk about some of the fundamentals that you look for and how you introduce it, because, there is a fear of young men and young women doing these exercises, and it blows my mind the objections that I get and hear from coaches on why they can't do it. And so I would like for you to talk about how you introduce them and just let it roll.
And I go back to what I learned from like Jones and Conroy and Gatone way back when. But, keeping it simple is very important. Your athletes really don't need to know about changes in position and, acceleration, things like that in the beginning. They just need to get positions, So we start out with the snatch. The snatch is actually easier to teach, I found.
Yeah.
Start out with snatch. We go from mid-thigh, teach a good, proper athletic base. And if it's a baseball player, I get them into a stance where they're hitting. If it's a wrestler, I get them into a ready stance. If it's a linebacker, I get them into a linebacking stance, whatever it is, and make slight adjustments. Yeah. Teach about where the pressure should be on the middle of the foot and not the heel, not the toe, shoulder relationship, and get them in that basic vertical jump position. Then I just have them jump. Then I put a bar in their hand, and we jump from mid-thigh position, jump, shrug. Then I will actually have them, I'll slow it down. I'll have them go into basically a high pull from that position where they'll set, come straight up, and just hold for 1 count. And I have them hold for 1 count up on their toe. And a lot of people will say, well, they don't really get like that. I said, I know they don't get like that, but I'm teaching this for a purpose. I want them to understand that they're not throwing their hips from east to west, that everything is north and south, and it's vertical acceleration. And all we're doing is a vertical jump or gymnastics with the barbell. So we get them there. Then I'll take them from there. I'll get them up on their toes in a high pull, and we'll pop it where I say hit, and they'll pop their feet out side to side into a squat position, turn over, and catch. And once they'll work now, 80% of my people will be able to move on right away.
Hey, it's like that. It's like that.
It's that quick. 80% of my people will move right away, and we'll take them down to the knee. And then we talk about where the bar is at the knee. Now your weight is on your heel. And for my football players, I say, we're doing a screenplay. We're executing a screenplay right now. You cannot launch yourself until the bar gets back up to that mid-thigh position we just mastered. So, if you had to regress it. And the screenplay, what happens if you toss the ball too early? Well, the running back gets blown up. If you hold the ball too long, the quarterback gets blown up. You got to wait till exactly the right position. So a lot of people wind up pulling early, so the bar is out front. Or they wind up throwing their hips and the bar loose behind them. So again, keeping that vertical position. And almost like if you go back to the sports psychology and learning and skill acquisition, you're looking at a constraints-led approach to it. And we're keeping it really simple that they have to stay in there. And sometimes I'll have them stand, and I'll stand. I don't recommend it to everybody, but I'll stand right in front of them.
Yeah, I know.
Right. Or I'll put them between in an old York
stick.
rack.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Or Gail Hatch, I'll put that stick out there.
Yeah.
Gail was famous with that. You talk about another guy that I learned a lot from. And we'll do that, and we'll get them from the knee, and we talk about transitioning, that the weight goes from the heel, they shift back, that there's no movement. It's just lifting the chest up to get back to that power position. They master that, then we'll take them to the floor, and we'll just do a lift off. We'll just do a pull to the knee. Well, what has to happen with the pull to the knee? Bar starts with the balance on midfoot. Your knees shift back, and the bar comes back to you. We're not looping the bar around like a lot of people do. Bar comes back to you, and you just hold it for a 1 count isometric hold at the knee. Once they master that, then we'll bring them that, pause for a second, shift into that power position, then launch. So it'll be like a 1, 2, 3 kind of approach. And once they master those parts, we'll put them together into the whole. Now, an athlete who's having trouble, we might just go from the hang, from mid-thigh or from the knee for the first couple of weeks if they're having trouble. Mm-hmm. But most of my athletes are athletes. And as athletes, they know how to jump and they know how to move. And I'll be honest with you, the girls pick it up quicker than the guys, because the guys will try to muscle through it, and the girls have to use technique to do it properly. That's why I always like, in weightlifting, I always like teaching the younger kids. One of he's actually the head coach for my club right now. I've stepped into being the executive director and helping him. I started Jordan Borges. He's a coach at Braden River, my old school. He took over with the program there, but I started him at 5 years old, and his older brother was 8 years old. His older brother was a national champion at 56. Jordan was a scholarship athlete at Northern Michigan, and I taught him at 5 years old, and we used to call him, angles and gangles and sticks and rags, because if he didn't do it right, there was no muscle to save a lift. And I find that technique is the way to go.
Yeah, that is awesome. So now, I've always told everyone to teach the snatch first, and people are afraid of teaching the snatch. So they'll teach cleans all the time. And then they say that they don't have time to teach the snatch. But I've always found that the snatch was so much easier to teach than the clean. And once you taught them how to snatch, then the clean became easier, because the movement pattern is very similar, except the bar stops here versus going overhead. But by teaching the snatch first, it was always easier for me to teach the clean second.
I fully agree. And with the clean, I remember. Do you remember? This goes back. Alvar Meal had his Steps to Success VHS video back in the 90s. Mm-hmm. I remember him talking about, it's here and here. It's not this, because so many people try to reverse curl, and just watching that as a power lifter at the time, it's like, oh wow, light goes off. So that's one of the reasons that I will, even though I don't use the upright row as a core exercise because it's the shoulder impingement issues, I will use the upright row as a teaching mechanism to get that elbow high, even if the bar doesn't get high, and to learn to drive under the bar. And that's the biggest issue with teaching cleans, because once they master their snatch, like you said, the movement patterns are almost exactly the same.
Yeah. All right. So it was funny when you started teaching the snatch, the first thing you did, you had to get up out of your chair. Okay. And that's what weightlifting coaches and good strength coaches do. They demonstrate, and then you have to, whether you use a stick to poke someone or you put your hands on them, sometimes you got to manipulate their bodies to put them in position so that they can feel what that feels like without the bar, and then with a stick or a light bar, and it helps them. But you can't stand back and just tell people what to do as a coach. You got to get in there and coach them. And I've told coaches before, you can learn to snatch yourself just by watching YouTube. We didn't have YouTube in the 80s. You had to buy everything, everything that you used to teach, you had to buy it. Now it's all for free. If you have access to the internet, you can go on YouTube and teach yourself how to teach these exercises. And then I think one of the reasons why people don't do them is they're not comfortable demonstrating, or they don't feel comfortable teaching it because they can't do it. And so I tell every coach, go to YouTube and teach yourself, and then you'll find out. Because, I've even had people say that the squeeze wasn't worth the juice. And so I said, well, how often do you clean and how do you clean? And it was always, well, we clean once a week or we just do hang cleans. Well, if you're only doing cleans, if that's the only variation of these 3 lifts that you do is the hang clean and you only do it once a week, then you're not going to see the benefits of doing snatches, cleans, jerks, clean pulls, snatch pulls, push and all the other stuff that comes around. So of teaching, when you teach the classic lifts, how much of the auxiliaries do you involve there at school? I call them drop snatches, but snatch balance. But how much of drop snatches and push press and power jerks and snatch and cleans from different positions, how much of that work goes into what you do there at the school, or is that limited to the young men and young women at Gulf Coast?
No. So my school weightlifting team always warms up with snatch balance, and they warm up with Isfan Javork's remaining complex, or a version of the remaining complex. That's our warm up. And then you throw in some 3-way shoulder and some hip circuit, and that's our warm up. So everybody does that. Now in season, like my football guys will do snatch from high blocks sometimes every other week. We'll switch it up just to let them go. We'll usually clean from the floor. During season, we might do some clean. I like block work for football better than I like hang work because I like having to go from that dead stop and turning stuff on just like that, like coming off the line. And too many people, when I used to visit other schools and, some great schools and stuff like that, but too many people do what I call the hip kick, horizontal power clean. They get that stretch reflex and jump forward. And that, and they say, well, we're not really seeing an improvement in our vertical jump. I said, right, because you're turning into a horizontal jump and pump. You're not going to, specificity of movement patterns are really important. So.
Yeah.
Yep. So
you got somebody coming in?
Yeah, somebody just walked in. They'll be out in a second though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Part of being at high school.
Yeah. Heck yeah. All right. What about jerks? Do y'all do a lot of jerks?
Yeah, we'll jerk. We'll do clean and jerk once a week, and then we'll do power jerk or push press once a week.
Yeah. All right. So, all right. I love this conversation. So, and I appreciate you taking the time to do this. So now, let me ask you, and I guess I'm more or less asking for a distribution of between the two. If you had to give me a percentile between the power movements, power snatch, power clean, and the classic lifts, what would that breakdown be?
In season, probably 60 to 70% power and 30% full. In season for my football. Off season, it'll flip. We'll do about 60 to 70% full cleans and full snatches, especially in weightlifting season. We'll only full. Like my girls team, if they don't full snatch, they lose their spot and somebody else moves up. They have to full snatch. That's the only way they get better at it.
Yeah. All right. So I meant to ask you, what about, while I heard you talk about snatch, you didn't say much about the muscle snatch. You said muscle clean.
So my injured people, let's say somebody comes off Friday's game at Palmetto and they're dinged up in the knee and stuff like that. When everybody else is snatching, they'll muscle snatch from the hang.
Yeah.
So they'll pull up, turn, and press, that type of thing. I know a good friend of mine who's, I guess he would be a mentor too, Dave Feely. I don't know if you know Dave over at Duke.
Feely? Oh, yeah.
Dave's awesome.
Hey, man, I'm a big Duke fan. So David hired one of my assistants from LSU. And I've got a lot of respect for David, man. David does a good job, and the Duke Blue Devils are playing good. They've had 2 tough losses, but they're playing good. They're playing real good. So anyway, I'm sorry. I get fired up.
I remember when Dave was at Miami, he was really pushing the muscle snatch. He showed me some videos, and they look good. So I'll work with them in the beginning once in a while. I look at them more like a push press almost, and a strength speed movement as opposed to a speed strength movement.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I use it like you. When guys are banged up, and I would do a lot of single arm. Like if a guy's banged up, let's say his left shoulder's banged up, I would do single arm muscle snatches with the opposite arm until, because sometimes if I'm hurt bad enough, anything I do hurts. And so I would start with just some muscle snatches with dumbbells or kettlebells or center of mass bells just to get the guy. Because I found that when a player's injured, the best thing I could do for him is to get him in the weight room because, especially in college, man, where they're so competitive, you take an injured guy off the practice field or out of the weight room, and their world comes tumbling down around them. So I would get them in the weight room and I would take them through a workout. And, before long, I'd have that sucker sweating. And he would be laughing and cutting up and talking about when he's coming back, how happy, because it does a lot hormonally and to get in there. And so we would sit and do just a bunch of muscle snatches and, single arm clean and snatch pulls. Well, you can't really do a single arm snatch pull, but for single arm clean pulls, it would be inside the leg.
Right.
Single arm
snatch
pulls.
We do that. We do one arm jerks. We'll do a one arm push press. We'll do a one arm squat to press.
Yeah,
we'll do
good.
That. Yeah, I'm a firm believer.
Hey,
not just
me and you are right there, man. If find a way and get it done, because
not just hormonally, but psychologically.
Yeah,
psychologically. They have now a sense that they are contributing to getting back on the field. They're doing something. They're being active about it.
Blood's flowing. All of these hormones are flowing, and their mind is right, and they're like, "Okay, I'll be back. I'll be back." We've even had guys on crutches, doing, 40 kilos and hang cleans, like a hang muscle clean,
right,
with a boot on. And they'd say, "No, coach, I want to work out." And I said, "All right, let's go." And they would sit there with a boot on and do some light 40 kilogram muscle cleans, I call them, and overhead presses. And because if those reps are done correctly within, a very small margin of error, it actually lays down layers of work that pay it forward when you're healthy and you get that barbell back in your hand. That's what I believe. I believe in
that's
that
true.
program.
And there's also been some research from a rehab position that contralaterally you still get some carryover. So like if I'm working the non-injured limb, the injured limb still gets some neuromuscular carryover and some recruitment patterns.
Yes, it does. All right, I want to ask you an equipment question here now that we're on weightlifting. Do y'all have bushing bars or needle-bearing bars at Manatee with your team?
Both.
Yeah.
Okay. Whatever I can afford, whatever we fundraise for, I'll get. I mean, as a weightlifter, I'm going to be partial to needle-bearing bars from the 90s and 2000s. But, back then, it was either, when I got started, it was like USACA, Alico, maybe you found a Lyoko bar. You had, York came back in the late 90s. But now there's so many different bars that you can get.
Everywhere.
While CrossFit may not be everything to everybody, CrossFit has exposed so many people and equipment and the ability to get different equipment. It's awesome. So we have any bar, if it rotates well, I'm going to use it.
Yeah, good deal. All right. So you mentioned Florida having weightlifting, and not a lot of people know that. And I have friends that coach over there, former athletes that I coach that are high school coaches that really push the sport at their school. So that's awesome. Can you talk about that program?
Sure.
And you've touched on it, but can you talk about the Florida high school weightlifting program throughout the state and what it means to have your team, go head to head with another school in snatch and clean and jerk, and how that differs a little from other sports that kids participate in?
Well, in the 70s, it started out as a way to do off-season football training, of course. Football teams would get together and, they clean and jerk and bench, those type of things. So it grew out of that. And then in the late 90s, girls weightlifting started as a recognized sport. And just about 3 years ago, we got the snatch put in finally. And by doing that, USA Weightlifting actually came on as a sponsor. They give a certain amount of money to sponsor a state championship series, but they also count. The state championship is actually a USAW sanctioned meet, and the totals actually count. They get rounded down to kilos, and they count for qualification. But for years, out of the Florida high school program, we had people like Brian Jacob and Tim McRae, who were multi-time Olympians, come out of Platka High School and Daytona, and my athletes that were national champions, like Robert Murphy and Pat Judge, and they were also high school weightlifters at one time. And Chris LaRue came out of that high school program, multi-time champion. Shelton Gilliard out of Palatka, 10-time national champion. They all came out of this high school, and they were taught through high school. And there's some great teaching. There's some great high school coaches doing some great stuff. But it's really exploded with women's weightlifting. It has. And now you'll be surprised, but the snatch is actually more. The snatch and the clean and jerk is actually becoming more popular than the bench press and the clean and jerk, the traditional, especially on the women's side. But one of the beauties about weightlifting is we know it's like wrestling. It's a weight class sport. Yeah. So I can recruit a 300-pound female athlete out of the hallway and a 100-pound athlete, and they can both be on the same team working together. So it's great. And the state championship, if you've never been to a state championship, I remember when Wes Barnett was our executive director, he would come down and watch, and Kyle Pierce would come down, and Roger Nielsen would come down. They'd watch and they'd recruit. And there are a lot of athletes now getting college scholarships for weightlifting. Mm-hmm. So it's a great program, and it's just one more chance, whether you're a wrestler or a weightlifter or a cheerleader or a soccer player or a volleyball player. It's just one more chance to be involved in a competitive event, which gets you mentally strong and gets the social atmosphere of working with others. But you also get better at your sport because of it. Yeah. Because it's a great way, the basics of my strength and conditioning program are the weightlifting movements.
Exactly. So my first year at the high school in New Orleans that I coached at, I got a flyer from Coach Hatch about bringing a team to the state high school weightlifting meet in Baton Rouge here. So I told my head football coach, and he goes, "There's no sense in going down there. Nobody trains like we do." And I was their third string coach, so I got the job in 1988. So I was their third coach, and he was like, "You don't want to go down there. It'd be a waste of time. Nobody trains like we do, et cetera." So I blew it off. I said, "All right." So then Coach Hatch then started calling me saying, "You got to come. You got to bring your players." So the next year, I put together a team. We went down there. We got beat so bad that the last team before us, we were last, okay? But the team that was second to last beat us by 40 points.
Wow.
And I went back, and he was like, how'd we do, Bubba? I said, "Coach, we got killed." He's like, "What? Who'd you take?" He had all these questions. He goes, "Well, we're not doing that again." I said, "What? We're not doing the meet?" He goes, "No, we're not losing again."
There you go.
So we went to work. And what it was is, I had focused on a strength and conditioning program, and we were doing more back squats than we were front squats. We were doing snatch, but we were not doing the classic snatch. So we were power snatching, and Catholic High, Coach Hatch was a Catholic High grad. He coached the Catholic High team. Every one of his guys were, they were doing the classic snatch. So we went to work. So my first question, though, for Coach Hatch, and I'd been up there to see Coach Hatch many times. My first question, I said, "Coach, your guys, it appears just by me watching that your guys are lifting the weight off the floor slower." And I was 23, 24 years old at the time. I said, "Your guys pull the bar off the floor a lot slower than my guys do. Why is that?" And he laughed just like I laughed. And he said, "That's because we're lifting twice as much weight as your players are. And it's heavy." And I said, "Oh," it hurt my feelings. It really did, But then the next year we finished second place. And then we won the next 5 years. And then my last year there, we brought an A team and a B team, and we won first and second place with our A's and B's. And they continued winning it for a couple of years after I left. And, but it was such a great experience to see those guys, young freshmen. My lighter weight classes like yours are probably, for us, I was the head wrestling coach. So I got all of my wrestlers to do it. But to see, those young lightweight guys walk out there, and, there's 75 now. In Florida, it's a lot more. Baton Rouge, there was probably 75 guys, 75 spectators,
Right.
Parents and a couple of news outlets. But to see them walk out on that platform and grab that bar for their first snatch attempt, to me, was just amazing. And our school got hooked on it, and it was something that they continued to do for a long time.
Well, it's fun, and they can do it the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
They may not use as much weight, may not move as bar. People ask me, like, if I do a meet, they say, "Well, how'd it feel?" I said, "Well, the weights feel heavier, the bar moves slower, but I'm having fun, and we're getting after it." So,
Yeah.
Hey, Coach, I'm on my 2-minute warning now. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, good. No, that's fine, because we had gotten to the end of it, so that is perfect. And I appreciate you doing this. I really do. And it's an honor to have you on here, and I can't say enough about you taking the time out of your day to do it.
Well, I'm a huge fan, and as I get older, like we talked about, the more I can give back. I'm not the huge social media platform guy that a lot of people are and things like that, but I just want to do as much as I can and make a difference. And it's a nice thing. We were at the Florida State Championships for high school last year. I took a picture with 5 guys, and they were all coaches, but they were all my athletes at one time.
Yeah.
So it made me feel proud that some guys are doing the tree, and they talk about like the Hatch tree, or they talk about guys coming out of Green Bay with Holmgren, all those guys, and the Parcells tree. But it's one of those things. It's what are we doing and why are we doing it? I feel like at high school I'm doing it because I can make a difference. I love what I do, so it's not like coming to work. I love what I do, but I can make a difference. And when you see a kid win that state title, you see a kid lift 10 pounds more or qualify for the state's first time, it makes it all worth it,
Yeah.
So
yes,
I'm a big fan of everything you've done, everything you continue to do, and I appreciate you having me on here.
Thank you. Hey, good luck to y'all in the playoffs too.
I appreciate it. We got one more regular season game, and today is actually our first meet for the girls weightlifting too, so I'm doing double duty for a little bit.
Okay, good. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Coach.
All right, bye-bye.